I'm Lisa, 32 years old, and I'm the computer worker who single-handedly pulled my company back from going broke. For 6 months, I worked 18-hour days, sleeping in my office, fixing their entire money system while my coworkers went home to their families. I saved them $12 million and kept them from shutting down. Last Friday, they celebrated by cutting my pay by 70%, calling it making things work better. They thought I'd quietly accept it, grateful just to have a job. But what they didn't know was that every fix I'd built, every system I'd created, every piece of computer code that kept their company running, it was all tied to my personal login. And at 5:47 p.m. on Monday, I decided to show them exactly how much my work was worth. If you've ever been treated badly at work, you'll want to hear what happened next. Like and subscribe for more stories of workplace justice. 6 months ago, I was just another face in the crowd at TechFlow Solutions. I had my small desk in the corner, my daily tasks, and my routine. Nothing special. I wasn't management material, at least that's what everyone thought. I was the quiet one who fixed problems when no one else could figure them out. Then came that Tuesday morning in January. I remember it clearly because it was raining, and I had forgotten my umbrella. I was still shaking the water from my jacket when my supervisor called me into his office. He looked pale, almost sick. "Lisa, we need to talk," he said, closing the door behind me. That's when I saw it, the bankruptcy notice sitting on his desk. The official document that would change everything. The company was 3 weeks away from closing its doors forever. $12 million in debt, systems failing, clients leaving daily. The management team was in panic mode, and honestly, they had every right to be. TechFlow Solutions was dying, and everyone knew it, but here's the thing about working in the background: you see everything. While other people were busy with meetings and presentations, I was the one actually keeping the lights on. I knew every system, every process, every weak point in our entire operation. I had been quietly fixing small problems for years, problems that others didn't even know existed. My supervisor explained that they were looking for volunteers to help with the crisis. Extra hours, no extra pay, just the hope that maybe we could save everyone's jobs. Most people would have started looking for new work right then. Smart people would have updated their resumes and started networking. Instead, I looked at that bankruptcy notice and saw something different. I saw a puzzle that needed solving. I saw systems that could be fixed, processes that could be improved, and a company that could be saved. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was stupidity, but I knew I could do it. "I'll help," I told him. "But I need complete access to everything. Every system, every account, every piece of data. If we're going to fix this, we need to do it right." He agreed immediately. What choice did he have? The company was drowning, and I was offering to throw them a life preserver. They gave me administrator access to everything: financial systems, customer databases, internal networks, external partnerships. Everything. That bankruptcy notice became my motivation. Every time I felt tired, every time I wanted to go home, I would look at that piece of paper and remember what was at stake. Not just my job, but the jobs of everyone I worked with. People with families, mortgages, dreams. I took that document home and put it on my refrigerator. Every morning, I would see it and remember why I was about to spend another 18-hour day at the office. It wasn't just about saving the company anymore, it was about proving that the quiet person in the corner could be the hero when it mattered most. Looking back now, I realize that bankruptcy notice was both a warning and a promise. A warning about what would happen if we failed, and a promise that I would do everything in my power to prevent it. Little did I know that the same dedication that would save the company would eventually be used against me. The first thing I did was map out everything. I mean everything. I spent 3 days straight creating a diagram of every system, every connection, every process that kept TechFlow running. It looked like a spider web drawn by someone having a panic attack. I drew it all by hand on a huge piece of paper I found in the supply closet. Computers were for implementing solutions. This kind of thinking required old-school pen and paper. I spread it across the conference room table and lived there for weeks. The financial system was a disaster. They were using 3 different software programs that didn't talk to each other. Customer payments were getting lost, invoices were being sent twice, and nobody knew how much money was actually coming in or going out. It was like trying to fill a bucket with holes in the bottom. The customer database was even worse. Duplicate entries everywhere, wrong contact information, and billing addresses that led to empty lots. No wonder clients were leaving. We couldn't even send them invoices properly, but I had a plan. I always have a plan. First, I created a new integrated system that would connect everything. No more separate programs, no more lost data, no more confusion. One system that would handle customers, billing, inventory, and reporting all in one place. Then I started building it. Not buying it, not hiring someone else to do it, building it myself. line by line, function by function. I wrote code that would automatically clean up the customer database, match payments to invoices, and generate reports that actually made sense. The architecture diagram became my Bible. I would stare at it for hours, seeing connections that others missed, finding solutions that seemed impossible. Every arrow on that diagram represented a problem I had to solve, and I solved them all. I worked through lunch every day. I worked through weekends. I worked through holidays. My coworkers would leave at 5 o'clock, and I would still be there at midnight, debugging code and testing systems. The cleaning crew got used to seeing me there. They would quietly empty my trash and refill my coffee cup without disturbing me. Sometimes they would leave me a sandwich or a piece of cake. They understood what I was trying to do, even if management didn't. Every line of code I wrote was tied to my personal login. Every system I created ran through my administrator account. It wasn't because I was trying to be controlling, it was because I was the only one who understood how everything worked together. That hand-drawn diagram became my masterpiece. It showed not just what the company was, but what it could become. Every connection, every process, every solution was there, in black ink on white paper. It was the blueprint for saving tech flow, and I was the only one who could read it. My phone was constantly buzzing with missed calls. Mom, my sister, my best friend from college, everyone wanted to know why I wasn't returning their calls. I would look at the screen, see another missed call notification, and feel guilty. But then I would look at my computer screen and remember that hundreds of jobs depended on what I was doing. My sister got married in March. I was supposed to be the maid of honor. Instead, I was debugging a customer payment system that had crashed. For the third time that week. I sent flowers and a card, but I knew it wasn't enough. The hurt in her voice when she called me the next day still makes me feel sick. "You missed my wedding for work," she said. "Work that doesn't even appreciate you." She was right, but I couldn't explain why I was doing it. How do you tell someone that you're trying to save an entire company? How do you explain that you're the only one who can fix it? My apartment became a disaster zone. Takeout containers stacked on every surface, clothes everywhere, mail piling up because I was never home long enough to deal with it. I would come home at 2 in the morning, grab a few hours of sleep, and head right back to the office. I started keeping a spare toothbrush and change of clothes at work. The security guard would let me in at 5 in the morning, and I would already be working when everyone else arrived. They thought I was dedicated. They had no idea I was slowly killing myself. My health was falling apart. I was drinking too much coffee, eating too much junk food, and getting too little sleep. I lost 15 pounds in 2 months, and not in a good way. My clothes were hanging loose, my skin was pale, and I had dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. But the systems were working. Slowly, carefully, everything was coming together. Customer complaints were down, payments were being processed correctly, and for the first time in months, we actually knew how much money the company was making. I kept screenshots of all the missed calls on my phone. 13 missed calls from my mom on my birthday. 7 missed calls from my best friend when her father was in the hospital. 22 missed calls from my sister during her wedding week. Each missed call was a reminder of what I was sacrificing. Each notification was a relationship I was damaging, a moment I was losing, a piece of my life I was giving up for a company that didn't even know my name. The worst part was that I started to think this was normal. I started to believe that this was what dedication looked like, what success required. I convinced myself that the missed calls didn't matter, that the relationships could be repaired later, that everything would be worth it when the company was saved. I was wrong about that last part. The breakthrough came on a Thursday in April. I was running my weekly financial report when I saw something that made me stop breathing. For the first time in 8 months, TechFlow Solutions was showing a profit, not a big profit, just enough to cover expenses and start paying down debt. But it was there, in black and white, on the screen in front of me. The financial recovery report that would change everything. I stared at those numbers for 10 minutes, afraid they would disappear if I looked away. Revenue up 37%. Customer retention up 52%. Processing errors down to less than 1%. Late payments down to almost 0. I ran the report 3 more times, checking the data sources, verifying the calculations. Each time, the results were the same. We weren't just stable, we were actually growing. The customer complaints that used to flood my inbox daily had dropped to almost nothing. The billing errors that kept me up at night were practically eliminated. The payment delays that had been choking our cash flow were now rare exceptions instead of daily problems. All the systems I had built were working perfectly. The integrated platform was processing hundreds of transactions every day without a single error. The customer database was clean, accurate, and growing. The financial reporting system was giving management real-time information they had never had before. I printed out that report and held it in my hands. $12 million in debt 6 months ago. now showing a monthly profit of $200,000. The numbers were beautiful, clean, and undeniable. This was it. This was the moment I had been working toward for 6 months. The moment when all the 18-hour days, all the missed calls, all the personal sacrifices would finally make sense. I walked to my supervisor's office with the report in my hand. He was on a conference call, but I waited outside his door until he finished. When he saw the numbers, his face went white. "These numbers are real?" he asked. "Completely real," I said. "We're not just stable, we're growing. Fast." He called an emergency meeting with the entire management team. I sat in the back of the room while they discussed the numbers, throwing around words like miraculous and unprecedented and game-changing. Nobody mentioned my name. Nobody talked about the systems I had built or the code I had written. They discussed the numbers like they were a natural occurrence, like the company had healed itself through some kind of business magic, but I didn't care. The company was saved. Hundreds of jobs were secure. The bankruptcy notice on my refrigerator was now just a bad memory. I had done what everyone said was impossible. That night, I went home early for the first time in months. I called my mom, my sister, my best friend. I told them the good news, that the crisis was over, that I would finally have time for the important things again. I looked at that financial recovery report every morning for the next 2 weeks. It was my proof that quiet people in the corner could change the world. It was my evidence that dedication and hard work still mattered. I was so proud of those numbers. I was so confident that everything would get better now. I was so sure that my sacrifice had been worth it. I was about to learn how wrong I was. The company newsletter arrived in my inbox on a Tuesday morning. The headline read, "TechFlow Solutions, a remarkable team recovery." I opened it with excitement, expecting to see recognition for the work I had done. Instead, I found a story about how the entire TechFlow team had come together to save the company. Management was quoted extensively, talking about their strategic vision and innovative leadership. The article mentioned dedicated employees in general terms, but nobody was named specifically. There was a photo of the management team shaking hands and smiling in the conference room. The same conference room where I had spent months building the systems that saved them. The same table where my hand-drawn architecture diagram had lived for weeks. I kept reading, looking for my name somewhere in the article. Looking for any mention of the integrated system, the customer database cleanup, the financial reporting platform. Nothing. According to the newsletter, the recovery was the result of improved team communication and streamlined processes. They made it sound like the company had fixed itself through better meetings and positive thinking. The article quoted the head of operations. "We implemented new efficiency measures that eliminated bottlenecks and improved customer satisfaction." My customer database rebuild had become new efficiency measures. The CFO was quoted saying, "Our financial oversight improvements gave us the visibility we needed to make smart decisions." My financial reporting platform had become oversight improvements. The worst part was the quote from the CEO, "This recovery shows what we can accomplish when everyone works together toward a common goal. It's a testament to the strength of our team and our commitment to excellence." Our team. Our commitment. Like he had been there at midnight debugging code. Like he had missed family events to fix broken systems. Like he had sacrificed his health and relationships for 6 months straight. I forwarded the newsletter to my sister with a short message. Guess who's not mentioned anywhere in this story? She called me immediately. "Are you kidding me? You saved that company single-handedly." "Apparently it was a team effort," I said, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Lisa, this is insane. You need to talk to someone. You need to get credit for what you did." But who was I going to talk to? The same management team that had just taken credit for my work? The same people who were now being celebrated as heroes while I remained invisible. I printed out the newsletter and put it next to the financial recovery report on my desk. The contrast was stark, real numbers showing real results, and a public relations story that erased my existence. My coworkers started treating me differently after the newsletter came out. They would congratulate me quietly, in whispers, when management wasn't around. They knew what I had done, but they also knew better than to say it out loud. "You're the real hero here," one of them told me by the coffee machine. "Everyone knows it. But knowing it and acknowledging it are two different things." Everyone knew, but nobody was willing to say it publicly. The official story was that TechFlow Solutions had saved itself through teamwork and leadership. I was just a footnote in someone else's success story. The quiet person in the corner who had somehow become even more invisible after performing a miracle. That newsletter became my reminder of how little my work actually meant to the people making decisions. How easily 6 months of sacrifice could be erased with a few paragraphs of corporate speak. The email arrived on a Friday afternoon. Subject line, "Meeting request, Monday 2 p.m. From the CEO's assistant. Marked high priority. Lisa, please attend a meeting with senior management this Monday at 2 p.m. in the executive conference room. We'd like to discuss your role in the company's recent success and talk about your future here at TechFlow. I read it 3 times. My role in the company's recent success. Finally, recognition. Finally, acknowledgement for what I had done. I spent the weekend thinking about what they might offer me. A promotion seemed obvious, maybe to senior systems analyst or even team lead. A raise was definitely coming. After saving them $12 million, they would have to show their appreciation somehow. Maybe they would apologize for not recognizing my work in the newsletter. Maybe they would explain that they had been waiting to announce my contributions properly in a more formal setting. I imagined walking into that conference room and seeing smiles, maybe even applause. I pictured them thanking me, apologizing for not recognizing my work sooner, explaining how they wanted to make things right. Saturday morning, I researched salary ranges for senior technical positions. Based on my accomplishments, I could justify asking for a 50% increase. Maybe even more, considering I had literally saved the company from bankruptcy. I made a list of my achievements. The integrated platform that processed thousands of transactions daily. The customer database that improved satisfaction ratings by 60%. The financial reporting system that gave management real-time visibility into company performance. The automated billing system that eliminated 99% of processing errors. I also made a list of future improvements I could implement. Enhanced security features, better performance monitoring, expanded reporting capabilities, integration with additional third-party systems. I had big plans for making TechFlow even more efficient and profitable. I called my mom on Sunday evening. I think I'm getting promoted, I told her. They want to meet with me to discuss my future at the company. Oh honey, that's wonderful. You deserve it after everything you've been through. My sister was excited too. Finally. Maybe now you can get your life back and still have a great career. I'm thinking they might offer me a team lead position. Maybe even make me head of the new systems department. That would be amazing. You could hire people to help you, get some of your life back, and still do the work you love. I went shopping for a new outfit. Something professional but not too flashy. Something that said, I'm ready for more responsibility, without looking like I was trying too hard. I settled on a navy blazer and gray slacks. I also bought a leather portfolio to hold my documentation. The achievement list, the performance metrics, the future improvement plans. I wanted to be ready for any questions they might have about my qualifications or vision for the department. Monday morning, I was at the office early. I reviewed all the systems I had built, checking performance metrics and making sure everything was running smoothly. I wanted to be ready for any questions they might have. I spent an hour organizing my notes about the recovery project. Financial improvements, system performance, customer satisfaction ratings, all the data they would need to justify whatever promotion they were planning to offer me. I even prepared a brief presentation about future improvements I could make. New features for the customer portal, enhanced reporting capabilities, better integration with external systems. I had it all planned out. The morning dragged by slowly. I tried to focus on regular work, but my mind kept wandering to the meeting. What would they offer me? How much would the raise be? When would the promotion take effect? At 1:45, I walked to the executive conference room. The one with the big windows and the expensive furniture. The one where real decisions got made. I had only been in there once before, when they gave me administrator access to everything. I knocked on the door at exactly 2 p.m. The CEO's assistant opened it and gestured for me to sit at the far end of the table. The entire senior management team was there: CEO, CFO, head of operations, head of sales, my supervisor. They were all smiling, but something felt wrong. The smiles were too tight, too formal. Nobody was making eye contact for very long. Lisa, thank you for coming, the CEO said. We wanted to talk to you about the company's recent improvements and how we can move forward together. I nodded, waiting for the praise, the recognition, the offer. My meeting request email was open on my phone under the table, a reminder of why I was there. We're very pleased with how things have turned out, he continued. The company is stable, profitable, and growing. We're in a much better position than we were 6 months ago. Thank you, I said. I'm glad I could help. Yes, about that, the CFO jumped in. We need to discuss some changes. That's when I knew. The tone, the body language, the way they were all avoiding my eyes. This wasn't a promotion meeting. This was something else entirely. The leather portfolio in my lap suddenly felt heavy. All my preparation, all my hopes, all my expectations, none of it mattered. They hadn't called me here to thank me or promote me, they had called me here for something much worse. The CFO slid a document across the table to me. Lisa, we need to talk about your compensation. I looked down at the papers in front of me. It was a new employment contract. My eyes went straight to the salary line, and I felt my stomach drop. My current salary was crossed out. The new number was 70% less. I'm sorry, what is this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It's a restructuring, the CEO said. Now that the company is stable, we need to make some adjustments to ensure long-term sustainability. Adjustments? I stared at the contract. This is a massive pay cut. We understand this is difficult, my supervisor said. But the crisis is over now. We don't need the same level of intensive work that we needed during the emergency. I looked around the table at their faces. They were all serious, businesslike, treating this like a normal conversation about normal business decisions. Nobody looked embarrassed or apologetic. I saved this company, I said. I worked 18-hour days for 6 months. I gave up everything to keep you from going bankrupt. And we appreciate that, the CEO said. But now we need to focus on normal operations. We need to return to standard business practices. Standard business practices? I repeated. What about the systems I built? What about the code I wrote? What about the $12 million I saved you? The CFO cleared his throat. Those systems are company property now. They're integrated into our operations. We don't need the same level of individual contribution going forward. I felt like I was going to throw up. They were talking about my work like it was a temporary project, like it was something that could be handed off to anyone. The systems run through my personal accounts, I said. I have administrator access to everything. We'll need to transition that, the head of operations said. We'll have IT set up new accounts and transfer everything to company-controlled systems. So you want to cut my pay by 70% and take away my access to the systems I built? We want to normalize your role, the CEO said. Return you to your original position with some additional responsibilities to reflect your experience. I looked at the contract again. Not only was my salary slashed, but my job title was the same as it had been before the crisis. No promotion. No recognition, no acknowledgement of what I had accomplished. The benefits section was worse. They were cutting my health insurance contribution and eliminating the small retirement match I had been getting. They were also reducing my vacation time back to the minimum level for new employees. This is insane, I said. You're treating me like I'm some kind of problem to be solved. We're treating you like a valued employee who helped us through a difficult time, my supervisor said. This is a fair compensation for your current role. Fair? I stood up, the contract still in my hands. I saved your company. I saved your jobs. I saved your careers. And this is how you repay me. Lisa, please sit down, the CEO said. We understand you're upset, but this is the best we can do given our current financial situation. Current financial situation? You just told me the company is profitable and growing. You just sent out a newsletter celebrating your success. That success needs to be sustainable, the CFO said. We can't maintain crisis-level compensation indefinitely. Crisis-level compensation? I was never paid extra during the crisis. I worked for 6 months at my regular salary while putting in triple the hours. The head of operations jumped in. The market rate for your position doesn't justify your current salary. We're bringing your compensation in line with industry standards. Industry standards for what? A data entry clerk? Because that's what you're paying me to be, apparently. I flipped through the contract again. The job description was exactly what I had been doing before the crisis. Basic system maintenance, report generation, data entry. No mention of system architecture, no mention of platform development, no mention of the expertise I had developed. You're eliminating my position, I realized out loud. You're turning me back into a junior employee and paying me accordingly. We're right-sizing your role to match current operational needs, the CEO said. Right-sizing, I repeated. That's what you call it when you steal someone's work and then refuse to pay them for it. The room was quiet for a moment. I could hear the air conditioning humming and the muffled sound of traffic outside the windows. We'll need an answer by end of business today, the CFO said. If you're not comfortable with these terms, we'll understand if you want to pursue other opportunities. Other opportunities. They were basically daring me to quit. I sat back down, staring at the contract. 70% pay cut. Same job title. Loss of system access. Reduced benefits. After everything I had done, this was my reward. We'll need an answer by end of business today, the CFO said. If you're not comfortable with these terms, we'll understand if you want to pursue other opportunities. I looked around the table one more time. These were the people I had saved. These were the careers I had rescued. These were the jobs I had preserved through 6 months of sacrifice, and this was how they chose to thank me. I walked back to my desk in a daze. The contract was still in my hands, the numbers still shocking me every time I looked at them. 70%. They wanted to cut my pay by 70%. I opened my laptop and started typing. Dear management team, I began. I am writing to inform you of my resignation from TechFlow Solutions, effective immediately. I typed for 20 minutes, pouring out my anger and frustration. I wrote about the 6 months of sacrifice, the 18-hour days, the missed family events, the health problems. I wrote about the $12 million I had saved them and the systems I had built from scratch. I wrote about betrayal and ingratitude and corporate greed. I wrote about how they had used me during the crisis and discarded me when it was over. I wrote about how they had stolen credit for my work and then punished me for their own success. When I finished, the resignation letter was 3 pages long. It was everything I wanted to say, everything I needed them to understand about what they had done to me. Then I deleted it. I sat there staring at a blank screen, thinking about my options. If I quit, they would just hire someone else and move on. They would keep the systems I had built, keep the profits I had generated, keep the success I had created. They would win. If I stayed and accepted the pay cut, I would be admitting that my work wasn't valuable. I would be telling them that they could treat me however they wanted and I would just take it. I would be betraying myself. I looked at my financial situation on my phone. Rent, car payment, student loans, credit card debt from all the takeout, meals during the crisis months. A 70% pay cut would destroy me. I might be able to survive for a month or two with my savings, but then what? I started calculating. My rent alone was almost as much as the new salary they were offering. Add in utilities, groceries, and minimum payments on my debts, and I would be in the red every month. I would have to move back in with my parents, declare bankruptcy, or somehow find a second job to make up the difference. The job market was brutal. I spent 30 minutes browsing job sites on my phone. Most positions in my field were paying less than what I had been making originally. The few senior positions available required years of management experience I didn't have, or specialized certifications I couldn't afford. I opened a new spreadsheet and started running scenarios. If I took the pay cut and found a part-time evening job, I might be able to scrape by. If I moved to a cheaper apartment, canceled my car insurance and took the bus, stopped eating out entirely, I might survive, but surviving wasn't living. Surviving was admitting defeat. I started typing again. This time it was shorter, more professional. I need some time to consider the offer presented to me today. I will provide my decision by tomorrow morning. I hit send and immediately regretted it. I was just buying time, but I didn't know what I was buying time for. My phone rang. It was my sister. How did the meeting go? She asked. I told her everything. The pay cut, the job title, the way they had talked about my work like it was nothing special. She was quiet for a long time. Lisa, you have to quit. You can't let them treat you like this. If I quit, I lose everything. No unemployment benefits, no references, no way to prove what I accomplished here. If you stay, you lose your self-respect. She was right, but it wasn't that simple. I had bills to pay, rent to cover, a life to maintain. A 70% pay cut would destroy me financially, but at least it was something. The worst part was the isolation. I couldn't tell my coworkers what had happened. They would find out soon enough when the new contract was announced. I couldn't complain to HR because HR had been in the room when they offered me the contract. I spent the rest of the day staring at my computer screen, not really working, just thinking. Every few minutes, I would look at the contract and feel sick all over again. Around 4 o'clock, my coworkers started asking me about the meeting. How did it go? Sarah from customer service asked. Did you get the promotion? Still discussing details, I said, forcing a smile. You deserve whatever they're offering you, she said. Everyone knows you saved this place. If only she knew what they were actually offering me. That night, I went home and sat on my couch with a glass of wine and my laptop. I started looking at job sites again, updating my resume, thinking about what I would tell potential employers about why I was leaving, but something was nagging at me. Something about the way they had talked about transferring my system access to company-controlled accounts. Something about the way they had dismissed my work as company property. I opened my laptop and logged into the administrative panel for all the systems I had built. Everything was still there, still running through my personal accounts, still completely under my control. They needed me to cooperate with the transition. They needed me to hand over my access voluntarily. Without my help, they couldn't just take control of the systems. That's when I realized something important. I wasn't as powerless as I thought. I walked back to my desk in a daze. The contract was still in my hands, the numbers still shocking me every time I looked at them. 70%. They wanted to cut my pay by 70%. I opened my laptop and started typing. Dear management team, I began. I am writing to inform you of my resignation from TechFlow Solutions, effective immediately. I typed for 20 minutes, pouring out my anger and frustration. I wrote about the 6 months of sacrifice, the 18-hour days, the missed family events, the health problems. I wrote about the $12 million I had saved them and the systems I had built from scratch. I wrote about betrayal and ingratitude and corporate greed. I wrote about how they had used me during the crisis and discarded me when it was over. I wrote about how they had stolen credit for my work and then punished me for their own success. When I finished, the resignation letter was 3 pages long. It was everything I wanted to say, everything I needed them to understand about what they had done to me. Then I deleted it. I sat there staring at a blank screen, thinking about my options. If I quit, they would just hire someone else and move on. They would keep the systems I had built, keep the profits I had generated, keep the success I had created. They would win. If I stayed and accepted the pay cut, I would be admitting that my work wasn't valuable. I would be telling them that they could treat me however they wanted and I would just take it. I would be betraying myself. I looked at my financial situation. Rent, car payment, student loans, credit card debt. A 70% pay cut would destroy me. I might be able to survive for a month or two, but then what? The job market was tough. Other companies weren't hiring much, and the few positions available paid less than what I had been making originally. Starting over somewhere else would mean taking another pay cut on top of the one they were proposing. I started typing again. This time it was shorter, more professional. I need some time to consider the offer presented to me today. I will provide my decision by tomorrow morning. I hit send and immediately regretted it. I was just buying time, but I didn't know what I was buying time for. My phone rang. It was my sister. How did the meeting go? She asked. I told her everything. The pay cut, the job title, the way they had talked about my work like it was nothing special. She was quiet for a long time. Lisa, you have to quit. You can't let them treat you like this. If I quit, I lose everything. No unemployment benefits, no references, no way to prove what I accomplished here. If you stay, you lose your self-respect. She was right, but it wasn't that simple. I had bills to pay, rent to cover, a life to maintain. A 70% pay cut would destroy me financially, but at least it was something. The worst part was the isolation. I couldn't tell my coworkers what had happened. They would find out soon enough when the new contract was announced. I couldn't complain to HR because HR had been in the room when they offered me the contract. I spent the rest of the day staring at my computer screen, not really working, just thinking. Every few minutes, I would look at the contract and feel sick all over. Again, that night, I went home and sat on my couch with a glass of wine and my laptop. I started looking at job sites, updating my resume, thinking about what I would tell potential employers about why I was leaving, but something was nagging at me. Something about the way they had talked about transferring my system access to company-controlled accounts. Something about the way they had dismissed my work as company property. I opened my laptop and logged into the administrative panel for all the systems I had built. Everything was still there, still running through my personal accounts. Still completely under my control. They needed me to cooperate with the transition. They needed me to hand over my access voluntarily. Without my help, they couldn't just take control of the systems. That's when I realized something important. I wasn't as powerless as I thought. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the systems, about the administrator access, about the way they had casually mentioned transferring everything to company-controlled accounts. At 3 in the morning, I got up and opened my laptop. I pulled up the system access log, the complete record of who had access to what systems and when they had used that access. What I saw made me sit up straight. My personal login was everywhere. Every critical system, every important process, every essential function ran through my administrator account. I wasn't just connected to these systems, I was the central hub that held everything together: the customer database, the financial reporting system, the payment processing platform, the inventory management tools, the customer service portal. All of it was tied to my personal credentials. Not because I had planned it that way, but because I had been the only one building and maintaining these systems for 6 months. I started making a list. What would break if my access disappeared? The answer was terrifying. Customer payments would stop processing immediately. The automated billing system would crash within hours. The financial reports that management relied on would stop generating. The customer service team would lose access to detailed customer information. The inventory system would go offline, but it was worse than that. The integration between systems would completely break down. Even if they could restore individual systems, they wouldn't be able to make them work together the way I had designed them to. I spent the next 2 hours mapping out exactly what would happen if my access was suddenly removed. The results were shocking. Within the first day, customer service would be crippled. They could answer phones, but they couldn't access account histories, payment records, or service notes. Every customer interaction would take 3 times longer. Within the first week, billing would be chaos. Invoices would stop generating automatically. Payment processing would require manual intervention for every transaction. Late fee calculations would stop working entirely. Within the first month, financial reporting would be completely broken. Management would have no way to track revenue, expenses, or profitability in real time. They would be flying blind. I had never thought about it this way before. During the crisis, I had been focused on solving problems, not on who controlled the solutions. I had used my personal accounts because it was faster and easier, and nobody had questioned it because the systems were working. Now I understood why they wanted me to stay, even at a reduced salary. They needed me to cooperate with the transition. They needed me to hand over my access voluntarily and help them understand how everything worked. But what if I didn't cooperate? What if I just walked away and took my access with me? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much power I actually had. They had built their recovery on a foundation that only I controlled. They had $12 million in debt. Relief, but it all depended on systems that were tied to my personal login credentials. I opened a new document and started typing notes. Not a resignation letter this time, but a technical assessment of what would happen if I left without transitioning my access. The list was long and devastating. Every system would fail. Every process would break. Every improvement I had made would vanish overnight. For the first time since that awful meeting, I smiled. They thought they held all the cards, but they were wrong. They had treated me like I was replaceable, like my work was just company property that they could take whenever they wanted. But my work wasn't just company property. It was still mine. Still under my control, still dependent on my cooperation. I had more power than they realized. I had more power than I had realized. The question was, what was I going to do with it? I spent the next morning researching employment law, contract disputes, and wrongful termination cases. I needed to understand exactly what my rights were and what the consequences might be for whatever I decided to do. I found out that forced pay cuts of more than 20% could be considered constructive dismissal in some cases. I learned about hostile work environments, breach of contract, and retaliation claims. I discovered that employers couldn't just take control of systems without proper authorization. I also researched the technical side. What would happen if administrator access was suddenly revoked? How long would it take to restore systems from backups? What kind of data loss might occur? The answers were not good news for TechFlow. System restoration from backups would take weeks, assuming their backups were complete and up to date. Data loss was almost guaranteed. Customer transactions would be interrupted for days or possibly weeks. I opened a notebook and started writing by hand. Not on my work computer, not on anything that could be monitored or recovered. Just pen and paper, old school. Plan A, accept the pay cut and stay. I wrote down the pros and cons: financial stability, keeping my job, maintaining my health insurance. But also accepting unfair treatment, losing my self-respect, and validating their decision to exploit me. Plan B, quit immediately and find a new job. Better for my dignity, but terrible for my finances. No guarantee of finding something quickly, and they would keep all the benefits of my work while I started over somewhere else. Plan C, use my leverage. This was the option I kept coming back to. I had built their recovery, and I controlled the systems that maintained it. Maybe it was time to remind them of that fact. I started outlining exactly what this would look like. I would need to be careful, legal, and professional. I couldn't just destroy their systems out of anger. That would be sabotage and could land me in serious legal trouble, but I could withdraw my cooperation. I could remove my personal access to the systems I had built. I could take back the work that was tied to my personal credentials. The more I thought about it, the more sense it made. They wanted to treat my work as company property, but they had no legal right to force me to maintain systems through my personal accounts. They had no right to demand that I continue supporting systems that I had built on my own time using my own credentials. I made a timeline. If I was going to do this, I needed to do it right. I needed documentation, legal backup, and a clear exit strategy. First, I would formally respond to their contract offer. I would decline the pay cut and explain my reasoning in professional terms. I would give them a chance to reconsider. If they insisted on the pay cut, I would submit my resignation with appropriate notice. I would offer to help with a transition, but only if they agreed to fair compensation for my work. If they refused to negotiate, I would remove my personal access to the systems I had built. Not destroy anything, not damage anything, just disconnect myself from systems that were tied to my personal credentials. It was a risky plan, but it was fair. They could have my cooperation and my expertise, but they would have to pay for it. They could have the systems I had built, but they would have to take responsibility for maintaining them. I looked at my handwritten notes and felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. For the first time since that awful meeting, I felt like I had options. They had made a mistake when they assumed I was powerless. They had forgotten that the quiet person in the corner had just saved their entire company. Now it was time to remind them. I started making backup copies of everything. Not company data, that would be theft. But documentation of my work, screenshots of system architectures, records of the improvements I had made. Evidence that I had created these systems and that they were tied to my personal credentials. I created a folder on my personal laptop called TechFlow Recovery Project and filled it with everything I might need to prove my case. Performance metrics, before and after comparisons, technical specifications, time logs showing the hours I had worked. If anyone asked, I was simply documenting my contributions for future job applications. Perfectly legal, perfectly reasonable. My behavior at work started changing in subtle ways. I stopped working late. I started taking lunch breaks. I began responding to emails during normal business hours instead of immediately. My coworkers noticed. "You seem different," one of them said. "More relaxed." I smiled. "I'm just trying to maintain a better work-life balance." What I didn't tell them was that I was testing the systems. I wanted to see how long it would take for problems to emerge if I wasn't constantly monitoring and fixing things. The answer was, not long. Within a week, I received 3 urgent emails about system performance issues. Small problems, easily fixed. But problems that hadn't existed when I was working 18-hour days. I fixed them quickly and professionally, but I made note of each incident. Documentation showing how much the systems depended on my constant attention. Management seemed oblivious to what was happening. They were busy celebrating their success, taking credit for the recovery, planning for the future. They had no idea that their stability was built on a foundation that required my daily maintenance. I started documenting everything in more detail. Every system fix, every performance optimization, every small improvement I made. I wanted a complete record of my ongoing contributions. The backup files I created weren't just documentation, they were insurance. If something went wrong, if they tried to blame me for system failures, I would have proof of exactly what I had built and how it worked. I also started being more careful about my communications. Every email was professional, every conversation was documented. I wanted to make sure there was no way they could claim I was being insubordinate or uncooperative. My coworkers started asking questions. "Have you decided about the contract? Are you going to accept the pay cut? Are you looking for other jobs?" I gave them vague answers. "I'm still considering my options. I need to think about what's best for my career. I'm not making any hasty decisions." But privately, I was preparing for war. Not the kind of war where you try to destroy your enemy, but the kind where you make sure they understand exactly what they're losing. They wanted to treat me like I was disposable. They wanted to take my work and pay me a fraction of what it was worth. They wanted to erase my contributions and pretend their success was a team effort. Soon, they would learn the true cost of their decision. They would discover what happened when you betrayed the person who held your entire operation together. The backup files were my preparation. The documentation was my ammunition. The warning signs were already there, they just didn't know how to read them yet. The paycheck arrived on a Thursday. I opened the envelope with shaking hands, even though I knew what I would find inside. 70% less than my normal salary. The number looked obscene on the pay stub, like a typo that someone had forgotten to fix. But it wasn't a mistake, it was my new reality. I stared at that paycheck for a long time. It wasn't just about the money, although the money was devastating. It was about what that number represented. It was proof that they valued my work at 30% of what it had been worth during the crisis. According to this pay stub, saving $12 million was worth exactly the same as filing reports and answering emails. Building integrated systems that transformed their entire operation was worth the same as basic data entry. I folded the pay stub and put it in my wallet. Evidence. Proof of how they really felt about my contributions. That afternoon, I requested a meeting with my supervisor. I needed to try one more time to reason with them, to give them a chance to do the right thing. He seemed surprised to see me. "Lisa, how can I help you?" I pulled out the pay stub and placed it on his desk. "I want to talk about this." He glanced at it and nodded. "I know the adjustment is significant, but we discussed this in the meeting. The company needs to return to sustainable compensation levels." "Sustainable?" I asked. "My work saved this company. I built every system that's keeping you profitable. How is paying me fairly unsustainable?" "Lisa, you're a valued employee, but the crisis is over. We can't justify emergency-level compensation for normal operations. Normal operations that depend entirely on systems I created and maintain. Those systems are company property now. They're part of our standard infrastructure." There it was again. Company property. Like my 6 months of 18-hour days had just materialized out of thin air. What if I told you that those systems would stop working if I left? He looked uncomfortable. Well, obviously there would be a transition period. But our IT team could handle the maintenance. Could they? Do they know how the integrated platform works? Do they understand the customer database architecture? Do they know how to troubleshoot the financial reporting system? We'd figure it out. We always do. I realized then that he genuinely didn't understand what I had built. To him, computer systems were just computer systems. He had no idea how complex my work was or how difficult it would be to replace. I need you to reconsider the pay cut, I said. My work is worth more than this. I'm sorry, Lisa. The decision has been made. If you're not comfortable with the new terms, we'll understand if you want to pursue other opportunities. Other opportunities. The same threat they had made in the meeting. I stood up and took the pay stub back. I need some time to think about this. Of course. Take all the time you need. I walked back to my desk and sat down. That final paycheck stub was burning a hole in my wallet. Physical proof that they were willing to exploit me as long as I let them. That night, I called my mom. They're not going to change their minds, I told her. They think I should be grateful for whatever they give me. What are you going to do? I'm going to show them what my work is actually worth. For the first time in weeks, I slept well. The decision was made. Tomorrow, I would find out what happened when you pushed the quiet person in the corner too far. I arrived at the office early on Monday morning. 5:47 a.m., to be exact. The building was empty except for security, just like it had been during all those months when I was rebuilding their company. I had my resignation letter printed and ready. Professional, brief, giving 2 weeks' notice. I also had a technical transition document outlining what would need to be done to maintain the systems after I left, but first, I had work to do. I logged into the administrative panel and pulled up the system deletion log. Not to delete anything, that would be sabotage, but to remove my personal access and credentials from every system I had built. I started with the customer database. I exported all the data to a neutral format and saved it to the company servers. Then I removed my administrator privileges and deleted my personal login credentials. The data was safe, but access would have to be restored by someone else. Next was the financial reporting system. Same process, export the essential data, remove my access, delete my credentials. The reports would stop generating automatically, but all the historical data was preserved. The payment processing platform was more complex. I carefully documented the process for maintaining it, saved all the configuration files to company servers, then removed my personal administrative access. Payments would continue processing until the system needed maintenance or updates. Each system took about 10 minutes to secure and disconnect from my personal credentials. I worked methodically, documenting everything, making sure no company data was lost or damaged. What I was doing wasn't destruction, it was separation. I was untangling my personal work from the company infrastructure. They could have the systems I had built, but they would have to take responsibility for maintaining them without my personal involvement. The integrated platform was the biggest challenge. It was the central hub that connected everything else, and it was completely built around my personal administrative account. Removing my access would essentially break the connections between all the other systems. I spent an hour documenting how the integration worked, creating step-by-step instructions for rebuilding the connections. I saved everything to the company servers where IT could find it. Then I systematically removed my personal credentials from every connection point. Each disconnection felt significant. The customer portal losing its link to payment history. The billing system unable to cross-reference accounts automatically. The financial reports no longer pulling data from multiple sources in real time. I created a detailed timeline of what would stop working and when. Customer service would notice problems first, within hours. Billing issues would emerge by tomorrow. Financial reporting would break completely by the end of the week, but everything could be fixed. The data was safe, the instructions were clear, and any competent IT team could restore functionality. It would just take time, effort, and expertise they didn't currently have. By 8:30 a.m., I was finished. Every system I had built was now disconnected from my personal access. The data was safe, the documentation was complete, but the systems would no longer run automatically. I printed the system deletion log and attached it to my resignation letter. Evidence of exactly what I had done and when I had done it. My coworkers started arriving around 9. I waited until 10 a.m., then walked to my supervisor's office with my resignation letter. Lisa, good morning. How can I help you? I handed him the letter. I'm submitting my resignation, effective 2 weeks from today. He read the letter quickly, his face getting paler with each paragraph. When he reached the technical attachment, he looked up at me with wide eyes. What is this? What did you do? I removed my personal access from the systems I built. Everything is documented and preserved, but you'll need to set up new administrative accounts to maintain them. You can't do this. Those systems are company property. The systems are company property, I agreed. But my personal access credentials were my property. I've removed my credentials and provided documentation for how to restore functionality. He was already reaching for his phone, probably to call the CEO. This is sabotage. No, I said calmly. This is a professional transition. All data is preserved, all documentation is provided, and I'm giving you 2 weeks' notice to arrange proper administrative access. I walked back to my desk and started packing my personal items. The system deletion log was my proof that I had acted professionally and legally. I hadn't destroyed anything, I had simply removed my personal involvement from systems that were never supposed to depend on one person's credentials in the first place. The integrated platform was the most delicate part of the process. It wasn't just one system, it was the nervous system that connected everything else. Customer data flowed through it to generate invoices. Payment information moved through it to update accounts. Financial data passed through it to create reports. I had built it like a spider web, with my administrative account at the center of every connection. Removing my access wouldn't destroy the web, but it would remove the spider that maintained it. I documented every connection point, every data flow, every automated process. I created diagrams showing how information moved between systems and wrote step-by-step instructions for rebuilding each connection. I saved everything to multiple locations on the company servers, then I systematically began disconnecting myself from the center of the web. Each disconnection was like cutting a nerve. The customer service portal could no longer automatically pull payment history. The billing system could no longer cross-reference customer accounts. The financial reports could no longer aggregate data from multiple sources. By 8:30 a.m., I was finished. Every system I had built was now an island, functional individually, but no longer connected to the integrated whole that had made TechFlow's recovery possible. I printed the system deletion log and attached it to my resignation letter. Evidence of exactly what I had done and when I had done it. My coworkers started arriving around 9. I could see them logging into their computers, trying to access systems, looking confused when things didn't work the way they expected. Sarah from customer service was the first to notice. Lisa, the customer database is acting weird. I can't pull up payment history. You'll need to talk to IT about that, I said. There might be some technical issues today. By 9:30, 3 more people had asked me about system problems. I gave them all the same answer: talk to IT, there might be technical issues. I waited until 10 a.m., then walked to my supervisor's office with my resignation letter. Lisa, good morning. How can I help you? I handed him the letter. I'm submitting my resignation, effective 2 weeks from today. He read the letter quickly, his face getting paler with each paragraph. When he reached the technical attachment showing the system deletion log, he looked up at me with wide eyes. What is this? What did you do? I removed my personal access from the systems I built. Everything is documented and preserved, but you'll need to set up new administrative accounts to maintain them. You can't do this. Those systems are company property. The systems are company property, I agreed. But my personal access credentials were my property. I've removed my credentials and provided complete documentation for how to restore functionality. He was already reaching for his phone, probably to call the CEO. This is sabotage. No, I said calmly. This is a professional transition. All data is preserved, all documentation is provided, and I'm giving you 2 weeks' notice to arrange proper administrative access. Nothing has been destroyed or damaged. I walked back to my desk and started packing my personal items. The few photos I had brought from home, my coffee mug, the small plant I had tried to keep alive during the crisis months, the system deletion log was my insurance policy. It showed exactly what I had done, when I had done it, and how it could be reversed. I hadn't destroyed anything, I had simply removed my personal involvement from systems that should never have been dependent on one person's credentials. By 10:30, the phone call started. First my supervisor, then the head of operations, then people I had never spoken to before. All asking the same questions: what had I done? How could they fix it? Could I please restore access immediately? Within an hour, my phone was ringing constantly. The emails started coming in waves. First from my supervisor, then from the head of operations, then from the CEO himself. All marked urgent, all demanding that I restore access immediately. Urgent, system failures across multiple platforms. Immediate action required, customer service issues, critical, payment processing disruptions, emergency, financial. The emails started coming in waves. First from my supervisor, then from the head of operations, then from the CEO himself. All marked urgent, all demanding that I restore access immediately. Urgent, system failures across multiple platforms, immediate action required, customer service issues, critical, payment processing disruptions, emergency, financial reporting down. I read each email carefully and responded professionally. I explained that I had provided complete documentation for restoring the systems and that the IT department should be able to re-establish administrative access within a few hours, but the emails kept coming, and the tone was getting more desperate. The customer service team couldn't access customer records beyond basic contact information. They could see names and phone numbers, but no payment history, no service records, no account notes. Every customer call was taking 3 times longer than normal. The accounting department couldn't generate any reports. The automated systems that had been creating daily financial summaries, weekly performance reports, and monthly budget analyses had simply stopped working. Management was flying blind. The sales team couldn't process new orders properly. They could enter customer information, but the system couldn't verify credit limits, check inventory levels, or calculate proper pricing. Several deals were stuck in limbo. The automated billing system had stopped working entirely. No invoices were being generated, no payment reminders were being sent, and no late fees were being calculated. Revenue was literally stopping. By noon, I had received 17 urgent emails and 6 phone calls, each one more frantic than the last. The IT department was in full panic mode, trying to understand systems they had never seen before. "Lisa, you need to fix this right now," my supervisor said when he cornered me at my desk. "The entire company is grinding to a halt." "I provided documentation for everything," I said. "Your IT team should be able to restore access using the instructions I left. They can't figure it out. The systems are too complex. They're saying it could take weeks." "Then perhaps you should have considered that before cutting my pay by 70%. His face turned red. "This is extortion." "No, this is the natural consequence of building your entire operation around one person's work and then deciding that person wasn't valuable enough to pay fairly." The emergency email chain was growing exponentially. Messages flying back and forth between management, IT, customer service, sales, and accounting. Everyone trying to figure out workarounds for systems they didn't understand. I forwarded copies of the most important emails to my personal account. Evidence of the chaos my departure was causing, proof of how dependent they had become on my work. Customer complaints were starting to pile up. Billing errors, delayed responses, incomplete service. The professional operation I had built was slowly falling apart without the integration that held it together. At 2 p.m., the CEO himself came to my desk. He looked exhausted and desperate. "Lisa, we need to talk. This situation is unacceptable." "I agree," I said. "It's unacceptable that you're paying me 30% of what my work is worth. We can discuss your compensation. But right now, we need you to restore access to these systems. I'm happy to help with the transition. My hourly consulting rate for system restoration is $200 per hour, with a minimum of 40 hours. Consulting rate? You work here. Not for much longer. And not at the salary you offered me." He stared at me for a long moment. "You're holding the company hostage." "I'm exercising my right to disconnect my personal credentials from company systems. You can restore the functionality anytime you want, you just need to follow the documentation I provided." The truth was, I knew they couldn't restore the systems quickly. The integration was too complex, the connections too intricate. It would take weeks for their IT team to understand how everything worked together, assuming they could figure it out at all, but I wasn't going to tell them that. They had made their choice when they decided my work wasn't worth fair compensation. Now they could live with the consequences. By 4 p.m., the emergency email chain had grown to 43 messages. Panic was setting in. Customers were calling to complain about billing errors. The sales team couldn't close deals. The financial reports that management relied on had simply stopped appearing. TechFlow Solutions was discovering what I had known all along. Their recovery wasn't just about good teamwork and positive thinking. It was about systems that I had built, maintained, and personally controlled for 6 months, systems that were now offline, waiting for someone else to figure out how to run them. Tuesday morning, I was called into the executive conference room. The same room where they had offered me the pay cut, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. The entire management team was there, but they looked like they hadn't slept. Papers were scattered across the table, laptops were open showing error messages, and coffee cups were everywhere. The stress was visible on every face. The security camera in the corner was blinking red, recording everything. "Good. I wanted evidence of this conversation." "Lisa, thank you for coming," the CEO said, though his tone suggested this wasn't really optional. "We need to discuss the current situation." "Of course. How can I help?" You can help by fixing the systems you broke, the CFO snapped. His tie was crooked and there were dark circles under his eyes. I didn't break anything, I said calmly. I removed my personal access credentials and provided documentation for restoring functionality. That's standard procedure when an employee leaves. Standard procedure doesn't shut down an entire company, my supervisor said. We've had customers calling all morning complaining about billing errors and service delays. Standard procedure also doesn't involve building critical systems around one person's personal accounts. That was a management decision, not my choice. The head of operations leaned forward. Our IT team says it could take a month to rebuild everything from your documentation. We don't have a month. Then you probably should have thought about that before offering me a 70% pay cut. The CEO held up a hand. Let's focus on solutions. What will it take to restore the systems? Well, you have several options. You can follow the documentation I provided and have your IT team rebuild the administrative access. That will probably take several weeks, but it's doable. Several weeks? The head of operations looked pale. We can't operate for several weeks. We're already losing customers. Alternatively, you could hire me as a consultant to restore the systems more quickly. As I mentioned yesterday, my consulting rate is $200 per hour. That's ridiculous, the CFO said. You can't hold us hostage like this. I'm not holding anyone hostage. You're free to restore the systems yourself using the documentation I provided. You're also free to hire outside consultants if you prefer. I'm simply offering my services at market rate. The room fell silent except for the hum of laptops and the occasional ping of new urgent emails arriving. The CEO leaned forward. Lisa, let's be reasonable here. You've made your point. We understand that your work was more valuable than we initially recognized. Can we discuss a revised compensation package? What did you have in mind? We could restore your original salary and discuss a performance bonus based on system uptime. I pretended to consider this, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. That's closer to fair, but it doesn't address the 6 months of work I did at below market rates. It also doesn't account for the fact that I'll be maintaining systems that I built during my own time using my own expertise. What are you proposing? Full restoration of my original salary, plus a 50% increase to reflect my actual contributions. A formal title change to Senior Systems Architect. And a one-time bonus equal to 6 months' salary to compensate for the work I did during the crisis. The room was silent except for the sound of someone's pen tapping nervously against the table. The CFO looked like he was about to have a heart attack. That's outrageous, he finally said. We can't afford that kind of compensation. You can't afford not to pay it, I replied. Without these systems, you'll be back in bankruptcy within a month. I saved you $12 million, I think I've earned fair compensation. The CEO was doing calculations on his phone. Even with your proposed salary, you'd still be our lowest paid senior staff member. And the bonus would be offset by the revenue loss from system downtime. Exactly. It's a bargain. And if we don't agree to these terms? Then you can restore the systems yourself. I'll honor my 2 weeks notice period and provide whatever assistance I can during normal business hours at my current pay rate. The security camera kept recording as they discussed my offer in hushed tones. I sat quietly, watching their faces. Seeing the moment when they realized they had no choice, they needed me more than I needed them. The quiet person in the corner had become the most powerful person in the room. The settlement agreement arrived on Thursday morning. 3 pages of legal language that essentially said, we were wrong, and we're sorry. My new salary was 50% higher than my original pay. My title was officially changed to Senior Systems Architect. The one-time bonus was equal to 8 months of my old salary, even more than I had asked for, but the best part wasn't the money. The best part was the formal acknowledgement of my contributions. The agreement specifically stated that I had, single-handedly, designed and implemented the systems that saved TechFlow Solutions from bankruptcy and continue to drive the company's operational success. In writing. Signed by the CEO. Legally binding. No more pretending it was a team effort. I had also negotiated ongoing control over the systems I had built. Any major changes would require my approval. Any system modifications would go through me first. They could have the systems, but only if they treated me as the expert I had always been. The restoration process took 3 days of careful work. I worked normal hours, took proper lunch breaks, and left at 5 p.m. each day. No more 18-hour marathons, no more sleeping at the office, no more sacrificing my health for their crisis. I methodically reconnected each system, testing every integration point, making sure everything worked perfectly. The customer service team watched nervously as their access to customer records was restored. The accounting department celebrated when their reports started generating again. By Friday afternoon, everything was back online and running better than before. Customer payments were processing normally, reports were generating automatically, and the integrated platform was running smoothly. I had even added some improvements during the restoration process. My coworkers treated me differently. Now, there was genuine respect in their voices when they spoke to me, acknowledgement of what I had accomplished. The quiet person in the corner had become the most important person in the building. Sarah from customer service stopped by my desk. "Thank you for fixing everything so quickly. I know this week was crazy for everyone." "Just doing my job," I said. But I appreciated the recognition. Management was professional but distant. They said, "Please," and "thank you," when they needed something from me. They scheduled meetings around my availability instead of demanding my immediate attention. The power dynamic had completely shifted. The company newsletter featured a story about me the following week. Senior Systems Architect Lisa leads TechFlow's technical innovation. My photo was on the front page, and the article detailed my role in the company's recovery and ongoing success. It was everything I had wanted. 6 months ago, recognition, respect, fair compensation, and job security. I had fought for it and won, but something had changed during those weeks of conflict. I had discovered that I was stronger than I thought, more valuable than they had claimed, and capable of standing up for myself when it mattered. The settlement agreement was more than just a contract, it was proof that quiet people could demand justice and get it. It was evidence that hard work and dedication deserved fair treatment and honest recognition. I kept a copy of the agreement on my desk, right next to the old bankruptcy notice that had started everything. A reminder of how far we had all come, and how much power I actually held. TechFlow Solutions was stable, profitable, and growing. The systems were running perfectly, the customers were happy, and the future looked bright. But now I knew something I hadn't known before. My work had value, my contributions mattered, and I didn't have to accept unfair treatment from anyone. The quiet person in the corner had learned to speak up. And when she did, people listened. 6 months later, I got a job offer that changed everything. Senior Technical Director at a Fortune 500 company. Salary double what I was making at TechFlow. Full benefits, stock options, and a team of developers reporting to me. The offer letter was beautiful, crisp white paper, embossed letterhead, and terms that reflected my actual worth in the marketplace. It was validation that my skills were valuable, that my experience mattered, that the quiet person in the corner had become someone worth recruiting. The recruiter had found me through my conference presentations and published articles. "We've been following your work," she said. "Your reputation in the industry is exceptional." I accepted the offer and submitted my resignation to TechFlow with 4 weeks' notice. Professional, courteous, and final, the exit interview was surreal. The same executives who had tried to cut my pay by 70% were now begging me to stay. They offered to match the salary, improve the benefits, give me more vacation time, even provide stock options. "We can't afford to lose you," the CEO said. "You're the backbone of our technical operations." "You should have thought of that before you tried to exploit me," I replied. "But I appreciate the acknowledgement. What would it take to keep you here?" "Nothing. I've learned that my skills are worth more than you'll ever be willing to pay, and my expertise deserves more respect than you'll ever be able to give." My last day at TechFlow was nothing like my first day. People stopped by my desk throughout the day to thank me, to wish me well, to tell me how much they had learned from working with me. The quiet person in the corner had become someone people respected and remembered. I left detailed documentation for everything, trained my replacement thoroughly, and transferred all system access properly. No bridges burned, no dramatic exits. Just professional competence and integrity. TechFlow struggled for months after I left. They hired 3 people to replace me, and it still wasn't enough. Their stock price dropped, customer satisfaction declined, and system performance became unreliable. The local business journal ran an article titled "TechFlow's Post-Recovery Struggles" that mentioned my departure as a turning point. Meanwhile, my new company appreciated what I brought to the table. They gave me resources, autonomy, and respect. They valued my input, implemented my suggestions, and promoted me to Vice President of Technology within 18 months. I started speaking at industry conferences about system architecture and organizational change. I wrote articles about workplace equity and fair compensation that were published in major business magazines. I became the expert I had always been, but now people knew it. The bankruptcy notice is still on my refrigerator at home, but now it's next to my new job offer letter, several industry awards, and a photo of me speaking at a conference. Reminders of where I started and how far I've come. TechFlow taught me that quiet people can change the world, but only if they're willing to speak up when it matters. They taught me that loyalty without respect is worthless, and that sometimes you have to risk everything to get what you deserve. Most importantly, they taught me that my work has value, my skills matter, and I don't have to accept less than I'm worth from anyone. If you're watching this and you've ever been undervalued at work, remember my story. Remember that you have more power than you think, more worth than they claim, and more options than they want you to know. Don't let anyone convince you that you should be grateful for unfair treatment. Don't accept exploitation disguised as opportunity. Don't let them cut your pay after you save their company. Fight for what you deserve. Speak up when it matters. And remember that the quiet person in the corner might just be the most powerful person in the room. Like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Share your own experiences in the comments. And remember, your work has value, even when they pretend it doesn't.